Welcome to part 3 of getting started with UDEC 7. In part 1, we looked at the basics of UDEC and what it is and how it works. And then in part 2, we walked through a very simple example using the graphical interface for ITASCA codes. In this part, we're going to run the same example. We're going to use the more modern GUI version of UDEC. So to get that started, you can go to your search bar in Windows and start typing in UDEC. And this time, instead of choosing UDEC 7 Geek, just choose UDEC 7. Now again, you can run this example without a license. And if you're doing that, you'll see this warning, but you can just hit continue to carry on. Now what we'll ask you if you want to open an existing project, or open the last project, or make a new project. In this case, we will choose the default option, open a new project, click OK, and then enter a project name. Recall that we exported a data file from the part 2 of this tutorial. We're going to import that same data file now, and so it will be helpful if you create this project in the same place where you exported that data file to make it easier to find. So that's what I'm doing here. And I'll just call this project sliding blocks. Now your screen may or may not look like this. What I usually do so that everyone is looking at the same sort of layout is you can go up here and choose a specific layout. And I like to use the wide layout. So if you go up to layout and choose wide, you should end up with something that looks like this. Now recall, as with the Geek version, the project is really just a wrapper or a container for different things. So you have data files, you have save states, and in the middle here you will have plots and an actual editor so you can look at the data files. Right now we don't have anything. So to get started, we will open into the project that data file that we exported earlier. So if you go to File and you say open into project, and we exported that file and called it slidingjoints.dat. So choose that and click open. And so what you will see here is the data file that we exported now imported into this GUI version of UDEC. In theory, we can just go and run this right now. But I will talk a little bit about the editor first. You can see that the editor here is quite a lot nicer than what we had in the other version. We have different colors for the numbers. The comments are shown in gray. The strings are shown in green. And so in general, it's just we have line numbers. We can change the font size. You hold down Control and spin the mouse wheel, and you can make it bigger and smaller. And there are lots of other controls that you can adjust with this editor. So there's a full-featured editor, and it's really geared up towards building up these models using commands. Now, what you see here is a bunch of commands, and you're probably not familiar with what these commands do. And so now I'll just talk a little bit about the help system. You go up to help, and you choose help. It will open up the help related to the commands and the fish in UDEC. Fish is the built-in scripting language, and we'll talk about that in a future tutorial. For now, we're just talking about the commands. When you did this, in your case, it may have opened up here on the right-hand side, in this right-hand side panel. If that's the case, that's fine, but it can be a little bit hard to read over there. So you can right-click on that and say Open in Default Browser, and then it will open in a browser, and you will see it something that looks like this. So here's all the UDEC commands and fish being displayed in my browser. In this case, it's Chrome, but it will work in any of the major browsers. All of these are links. So this is an HTML document, and you can click on these things to get information about the specific commands. And remember earlier in part 1, we described how the commands follow the pattern of noun, verb, modifier. So often, In UDEC, you're doing something to blocks. So it would be, for example, block, apply, and then something, a force or a rotation or a velocity. So this is the general help. But we can dig down a little bit deeper here. Let's pretend, and usually when you're doing these models, you probably are starting from an existing example. You're usually not writing something from scratch. So let's pretend you have an existing data file, but you're not 100% sure what these commands are doing. So here, for example, block create polygon. I'm interested to know more details about this block create command. So I can hang my mouse over it and press F1, and it will bring up that specific command in the help. And I can read more details about how that specific command is used. Another thing you can do, let's pretend you know that you want to use block create, but you're not sure exactly what the following keywords are. So I could start typing block create, and then if I hit Control space, it will actually give me the options of what I can fill in here. So I can choose block create brick, and I could just double click on that, and it will enter it for me. And then it's looking for some coordinates, so I would have to type those in. For example, the lower x coordinate, the upper x coordinate, the lower y coordinate, the upper y coordinate, and so on. So you can see how by using this control space, you can interactively build up these commands in UDEC. Okay, so that's mostly about the help. Now that is related to the commands and the fish. There is also other help that is not in HTML format. So if I go to help and I choose manual, what I get is the PDF manual, which is basically everything other than the commands and fish. So there's the getting started and the problem solving section, the theory section, special features, and then a whole bunch of examples. And having this in PDF format is convenient because it's a lot easier to just print them out and maybe have them beside you while you're looking at them. So just to review, the commands and fish are in HTML format, and this is convenient because it allows us to have this interactive help and it allows us to have these links. The rest of the help system is in this PDF format. Okay, let's get on with running the example. Now, if you do not have a license, you can run this example, but it will not allow you to save the states. And so you'll see through here, there are a bunch of lines, model save, sliding 1, model save, sliding 2. You will remember in the part 2 of this tutorial how we save the state as we went along. This will not work if you do not have a license. So if you don't have a license, you should go through and comment out these model save commands. And you can do that by just adding a semicolon in front of them. Again, this is a fairly sophisticated editor, so you could do this more systematically by going to Edit, Replace, and replacing model with semicolon model, and hit Replace All. And that will get rid of the model save and the model restore, which also does not work when you have when you don't have a license. I'm actually going to undo all of that. So look, there's an undo key here. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to plug in my key so we can run the whole thing and not worry about saving and restoring problems. So if I plug in my key, I can just run this data file. There's only one thing that will not work, and that is the plot commands right at the end. So these plot commands are specific to the geek that we talked about in part 2. There's a different way of plotting in this other GUI. So the only thing I need to do here, if I have a license, is pick out this plot command at the end. Then once I have this data file, which is just a text file with commands in it, I can run it by pressing on this green button. You can see it says execute the active page. So I run that. Gives me a warning about groups assigned to joints, but that's not important for this example. And basically it ran through this thing, and now I can see over here on the left-hand side, I've got 5 saved states. And so you'll remember these were different situations where we saved the state as we went along. And so now probably what you want to do is actually create some plots and see the results. So you can see here that this is divided into tabs. There's a tab for the data file, and there's also a tab with a blank plot. I can create as many plots as I want. I can just go File, Add New Plot, and add more plots. But for now, I'll just use this existing plot 01. I can also rename this. If I just right-click on it, I can rename this plot. So we can do that, and maybe just call it blocks. So here I've got a blank plot. I want to plot something. The way to do that is to go to this plus here under plot items, and here are all the things I can choose to plot. Often you'll start by plotting the blocks, so I can double click on block here, and there I've got the 3 blocks. So you can see I've run the whole model now, and I've got to the end where these things are actually sliding. And so if you recall, we set the final friction to 11 degrees, and that meant that the bottom joint and the top joint were both sliding. And you can see that happening here with these blocks. You can see that the plotting in this modern version is a little bit nicer. It does create sort of more attractive plots. Now to replicate what we did earlier, we've got the blocks on here. We could also plot vectors of displacement. So if I click on this plus, and under block I choose vectors, again I can double click on it. By default it's showing me displacement. You can see here under type, I could choose different things, velocity, acceleration, and so on. For now, displacement is fine. By default, it plots the vectors with the maximum vector size equal to 5% of the model size. So you can see that here under scale. If you expand this scale option here, it says target the 5%. Maybe you want the vectors to be a little bit bigger. Let's say make them 10% of the size of the model. So now it's a little more obvious. You can see these vectors a little more clearly. You can definitely see the motion of this top block and the bottom block. And there are all kinds of other things you can adjust here under the attributes. You can change the color of the vectors. I can color them by magnitude. So now red is high displacement and blue is low displacement. And there are other things I can adjust here. And similarly with the blocks, you have a lot of power over this plot. For example, if I look at the color list, maybe I don't like the top block being red, I can change it to be a different color. And so there's a lot of power you have over the plots here in this new GUI version. Another thing that's interesting here in this GUI version is the ability to get information from the plot. So if I hold my mouse over one of these blocks and I look in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, there's an information box that's telling me information about the block that I'm inside. If I want even more detailed information, I can click on this little arrow with the question mark, which we call the query arrow. And now if I hang over one of these blocks and click on it, it says, do you want information about the block or the information about the nearest corner? If I choose the block, then I get this dialog with all this information about the block. Its centroid, its velocity, its mass, and so on. And I could even copy this to the clipboard if I want to. So that's almost it with this simple example. Again, we have this project, and now might be a good time to save the project. And what that does, again, the project is just a container with one or more data files and one or more save states. and generally one or more plots. We could go through here and double click on these save states to bring them back and see what they are. So if you recall, state 1 was just getting to the initial equilibrium. State 2 was getting to the initial equilibrium. State 3 was with the high friction, so only the top block was sliding. And then the 5th one was the lower friction with all the blocks sliding. So you can see how easy it is to just cycle through these different save states by double-clicking on them and looking at the plots. And that is the end of this tutorial.